Parshat Chayei Sarah. Welcome to my weekly Parsha share. This week the share is in memory of my late mother, Miriam Chanatikva, Bas Uri Yehuda HaKohen. It's been 15 years since she passed away. It's the 21st of Cheshvan today, Chof Aleph Cheshvan. And she was a wonderful woman. We miss her every day. And I'm so glad to be able to share some Divrei Torah with you in her memory. May her neshama have an aliyah, and may we all be zaken to see Tchias HaMesim. The beginning of chapter 24, Chof Daled in Bereshis, begins with a very interesting and quite strange pasuk. And you're going to hear why it's quite strange. I'm going to say it for you. Va'Avraham zaken ba bayamim, v'Hashem berach es Avraham bakoil. Avraham was zaken, old. Ba bayamim. What does ba bayamim mean? So ba bayamim means he was advanced in his days. It means he was extremely old. But it already said he's zaken, he's zaken. So why does it need to say ba bayamim? V'Hashem berach es Avraham bakoil, and God blessed Avraham with everything. And there's a number of midrashim on what that particular phrase means. We're going to look at the Nesivos Sholom, who's going to focus on this particular pasuk to draw out the unique attribute of Avraham Avinu, of our patriarch Abraham, so that we can understand exactly what the pasuk is trying to tell us and why it's so important that we have it included in the Torah. Va'Avraham zaken ba bayamim. Hinei loshoin ba bayamim. Says the Nesivos Sholom that this phrase of ba bayamim, advanced in his days, you don't find it in the Torah. It doesn't say it about anyone else in the Torah besides for Avraham Avinu. That's very interesting. Avraham Avinu is the only person who gets mentioned in this context of ba bayamim. By the way, there's another person who's mentioned in Tanakh as ba bayamim. Do you know who it was? David HaMelech. It says the same thing. But David hoya ba bayamim, hizokin ba bayamim, he was also ba bayamim. I would imagine that in some respects that what we're going to say in today's shir applies to Avraham and it applies to David HaMelech, but Avraham is, as it were, the headquarters. Whenever we have something in the Torah or someone in the Torah about whom there is a unique quality, and that unique quality is identified with them specifically, that's because they are the headquarters, they are the exemplar of this particular quality, of this particular attribute. And that's what we're going to hear today about Avraham Avinu. By the way, I said that this shir is in memory of my mother. I would identify this attribute, and by the way, it's the attribute of chesed, with my mother. And of course, she was married to my father, whose name was Avraham, Abraham. So, Abba, that's how he was known throughout the Jewish world, and they both exemplified this incredible attribute of chesed. So I'm dedicating the shir to my mother's memory, but we're including in that my father's memory as well. Va'Avraham zaken ba bayamim. Hinei loshen ba bayamim lo matzinu b'Torah el Avraham Avinu. V'yesh lahavin. We need to understand ma moisef ba'omrei ba bayamim. Why did the pasuk need to add? Why did it need to include this phrase of ba bayamim? Haloi kfar nemar zaken. We already said that he's old. V'chol zaken hu ba bayamim. Zaken and ba bayamim are the same. It means exactly the same thing. So why would you want to say the same thing twice? It says that when Yitzchak was elderly, it says zaken, but it doesn't say when he was zaken and ba bayamim, it just said when he was zaken. So why with Avraham Avinu do we add this additional phrase of ba bayamim? If you look at the end of the pasuk, it says Vashem berach es Avraham bakoil loy nimtza b'sha'ar avos. We don't see this phrase, this idea that God blessed them with everything, or him with everything, ever mentioned about Yitzchak, nor is it ever mentioned with regard to Yaakov. It's only ever mentioned in one place, Vashem berach es Avraham bakoil. Avraham was blessed with everything, and that's why the Nesivos Sholom wants to understand what this phrase means, why it's used uniquely in the context of Avraham Avinu and not in the context of Yitzchak Avinu or Yaakov. So another thing that we see that's mentioned about Avram, it's mentioned earlier on, is that he will be a blessing. V'heyei bracha. Very interesting thing, right? Avram Avinu is not that he will be blessed, but his mere existence, his actual being in this world, v'heyei bracha, he will be considered a blessing. What does that mean? Chazal, if you look in Bereishis Rabbah, it says, Amru al zeh, kol hanoigea ba'Avram Avinu misbarech. Anybody who comes into contact with Avram Avinu will be blessed. Anyone who sees Avraham Avinu, all you need to do is see him. You saw him walking down the street this morning. That's going to be a blessing. Misbarech, they will be blessed. Anybody who was involved in any aspect of his life, somehow they will be blessed. Unbelievable. He himself is the source of blessing. Not that they need to be blessed in some other way. Simply by coming into contact with him, they will be blessed. That's what Chazal say in Bereishis Rabbah. V'yesh lefarish, v'yesh lahavin, lama nizkar inyan zeh rak b'Avram Avinu. We need to understand why specifically, why is it that this aspect is only mentioned when it comes to Avraham Avinu? Why is it Avraham Avinu that's the bracha? Why isn't Yitzchak a bracha? Why don't we say about Yitzchak, Vayei bracha? Why don't we say about Yaakov, Vayei bracha? Why is it only about Avraham Avinu? Oy darshu Chazal. Here we have another Chazal. They say as follows, it's in Psochim, Daf Kuf Yud Zayin Omid Beis. Beberkasoi shel Avraham Avinu. Vayei bracha. In that blessing that was given to Avram Avinu, that he should be a blessing. B'cha choismin mogein Avraham. The first bracha of Shemona Esrei, if you recall, is the bracha that we call the bracha of Avos, of the patriarchs. Now, it starts off, Baruch atah Hashem, right? And then it says, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. But then when it ends, the bracha doesn't say, Baruch atah Hashem mogein Avos. It says mogein Avram. It specifically focuses on one of the patriarchs and doesn't include all three. So that's based on a Gemara. The Gemara says B'cha choismin, that you will close the bracha. V'gam zeh sorich biur. Says the Nesivos Sholom, we really need to understand why should that be the case. Hari b'tchilas b'rachas ha'avos mazkirin lekei Avram lekei Yitzchak v'lekei Yaakov. At the beginning of that blessing, we do mention all three patriarchs. We mention Avraham, we mention Yitzchak, and we mention Yaakov. And yet, umadua be'emes choismin rak mogen Avraham v'lo mogen Avos. Why don't we end with the bracha of Baruch atah Hashem mogen Avos at the end of the first bracha of Shemona Esrei? Why do we say mogen Avraham? Why do we exclusively focus on Avraham to close the blessing of the first one, the first bracha in Shemona Esrei? V'yesh lefarish. The haposuk v'Avram zaken bayamim mechuven al midasei shel Avram Avinu midas hachesed. So I already mentioned that this entire shir is going to be focused on the unique attribute represented by Avraham Avinu, and that is the midah of chesed, the midah of kindness. And in a sense, this is a continuation of last week's shir. We said last week, Olam chesed yiboneh, the world functions only because of the existence of kindness, and this is going to be a continuation of that theme, and that everything that we know about kindness is associated with Avraham Avinu. He is the paradigm of kindness, and now we're going to understand why kindness is such an important part of everything that happens in this world. You're going to hear some incredible chidushim today, some wonderful ideas that the Nesivos Sholom presents us with. So the Midas HaChesed, says the Nesivos Sholom, she'oleo nemar bo bayamim. Why does it say bo bayamim in the sentence? Because bo bayamim is not a reference specifically to his age, that we already said. We said zaken. So what does bo bayamim refer to? What does it mean when the pasuk says this Hebrew expression of bo bayamim? It means it's referring to chesed, the midah, the attribute the characteristic of chesed which Avraham Avinu had in such abundance. He says, he brings something that was said earlier by one of the earlier rebbes of the Slonim dynasty, who was from Kabrin. He says as follows: "The yom sheyehudi eino oisa by chesed loy nechshav k'yom b'chayov." You need to know something. There's a principle that you need to understand. You need to have it at the very core of your being. A day in which you do not perform any act of kindness is not called a day. It's as if the day never happened. Do you hear that? That the day that goes past and you didn't do an act of kindness, it's as if the day never happened. The day doesn't count. So when we say that Abraham was bo bayamim, this is the implication that we're going to see here, that the Nesivos Sholom picks up on, is because each and every day was a day that was full of kindness. He was an ambassador of kindness in this world, and each and every day mattered. So he was a bo bayamim. He was old not just in years and in the number of days that he'd lived, but each and every day he had lived, because it didn't count as nothing, because he had used each and every day to the full in terms of the amount of kindness that he could display and that he could act on. Kamarumas b'mamar HaKosov, he mentions a pasuk in Tehillim. V'yesh levar goydel dargosa shel midas hachesed. We need to really understand, explain, to bring out this idea, to fully unpack what it means that chesed is at such an elevated level, that it's so important that if you have a day without chesed, it's as if that day didn't happen. Madua yeshna inyan zeh dafka b'midas hachesed. Why is it that it's the midah of chesed that we say this with? That what we're talking about, Yosem mikol sha'ar midos, more than any other attribute or any other thing that you do in the course of your life. There's many things that we do in our lives that are not related to chesed, which are very important. For example, we study Torah. Let's say you're a Jewish person, and every day we want to study Torah. What happens if you woke up one morning, you spend the whole day studying Torah? You hear that? From the morning until the night, you studied Torah. I'll give you another example. You woke up one morning, you spent the whole day from morning till night davening. You didn't do any chesed. Why? Because you were davening. You didn't do any chesed. Why? Because you were studying Torah. You didn't do any chesed. Why? Because I was busy sitting in my sukkah. It's sukkahs, I wanted to sit in my sukkah. I spent the whole day in the sukkah. I did the mitzvah of sukkah. It's as if the day didn't count. That's what we just heard. That if a day passes, that you didn't do an act of chesed, it's as if the day never happened. V'yesh lebayr goydel dargosa shel midas hachesed. Madua yeshna inyan zeh dafka b'midas hachesed yos mikol shara midos. The Nesivos Sholom wants to understand this. How can you suggest that in the pecking order, chesed is at the top of the list? Shigam kashe yasik kol hayom b'Torah mitzvahs. Are we suggesting that if a day goes past where you studied the whole day Torah, or whatever other mitzvah you did, any of the other mitzvahs in the Torah, but you didn't do an act of chesed, that day doesn't count? How could you suggest such a thing? Why? Mishum shemidas hachesed hi kedichsiv ki omarti olam chesed yibane. The pasuk we mentioned in last week's shir, because Hashem says, it's a pasuk in Tehillim, that if you want to understand the world, the creation of the world. We don't understand much of the creation of the world. We understand some of the mechanics, and we know some of what it is has been filtered through to us through the medium of the Zohar and of Kabbalah, but we don't really understand why the world was created or what Hashem wants from us. But we do understand one thing, that the fact that the world exists at all is because of Hashem's attribute of kindness. Hashem is kind by allowing a physical universe to exist because he's purely spiritual. He has created the possibility for a physical world to exist, for you and I to be here. That is an act of God's kindness, and for that we say, Ki omarti olam chesed yibane, says the pasuk in Tehillim. Binyan ha'olam kulo al yedei midas hachesed. The entire universe was created through the attribute of chesed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu baras kol habriya b'midas hachesed. Why? It gave God the opportunity, as it were, to do good. So if God lacks in anything, and I'm not suggesting this is purely our human reasoning, our human understanding. If there was one thing God couldn't do on his own in Shemayim before there was a universe, is do chesed. Okay, so you're going to say it's not important for God to do chesed. But here is an opportunity for God to be able to shower chesed. How can he do that? By creating the universe, by creating the world, by creating people, by creating his chosen nation. God has enabled himself to do chesed. Olam chesed yiboneh. So that's what it means, that the underpinning, the fundament, the platform that the world exists upon is chesed. The fact that anything or anyone or any part of the universe exists is only because of God's attribute of chesed. Now, if you want to understand, every yin has a yang. Every left has a right. Every mizrach has a ma'ariv. If you want to understand this, you need to understand that if there is no chesed, if it's true to say that the world, the universe was built on chesed, if there is no chesed, it's a churban, it's a destruction of the world, because it's the opposite. If that's the white, then that's the black. That's what's important to understand. The olam chesed yibana, and that without chesed, it's not possible for the world to persist. V'haderech lahamshich chesed. Kail al ha'odam hi al yidei midas ha'chesed. How can we emulate God and his midas ha'chesed, his attribute of kindness, is by us demonstrating and acting out kindness to others, to his creatures, to his creations. K'ma'amoram zal, as Chazal tell us, it's a Gemara in Shabbos of Kufnun Aleph Amud Beis. Kol hamarachim ala briyos, marachmin olav min hashamayim. Anyone who has mercy on creatures of creation, God, heaven, will have mercy upon them. And the Baal Shem Tov said in his name, they say it in his name, Al HaPosuk, Hashem Tzilcha. It says that Hashem is your shadow. What is a shadow? A shadow is whatever you are. The shadow is an exact replica of what you are. That's what the shadow is. If you want to know why Hashem behaves with you in a particular way, it's because he shadows you. He behaves like you behave. If you behave in a particular way, he will behave towards you. That's what the Baal Shem Tov says. He will behave towards you in that very same way. Everything that a person does is shadowed, is echoed in this shadow that Hashem is of them. That's, as it were, it's a kind of, it's an analogy. It's because obviously God isn't a shadow, but if you want to understand God's behavior towards you, it is because God behaves as a shadow towards you. He's a reflection of your behavior. That's how God's behavior is towards you. Which means that if any Jew, any person behaves with the midah of chesed, with this attribute of kindness, of compassion, that's how God will behave towards them with chesed. These are B'Zohar HaKadosh, and the Zohar says that when a bad decree is set in Shamayim against any individual, then in order to maybe offer an opportunity for that person to escape from the Gezerah, he will have something will happen to him, an incident will occur to him during the course of that day or that period, in which he'll have the opportunity to give money to a poor person, to an oni, or some other act of chesed. Not quite sure what act of chesed, it's not important. That opportunity, as a result of him behaving with chesed towards others, God will behave with chesed towards him and will revert back to neutral and won't treat him harshly, even though there was this gezerah hanging over his head. It's an unbelievable idea if you think about it. Because when you have the opportunity to give charity, you're thinking to yourself, should I, shouldn't I give charity? Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. If you give charity, if if your automatic reaction is, you know what, I'm going to give the charity, then that's how Hashem is going to behave towards you. That's exactly how God will act towards you if you act that way. When you're given the opportunity to be kind, and that's what you do by default, then when Hashem is given the opportunity to be kind towards you, that's what Hashem will do by default. You have to understand that we have this idea in Jewish theology that each and every day is a new creation. It's not something that was set in motion at the beginning of time. That's not the way it works. Each and every day is a new creation. There's no such thing as God coasting. The universe doesn't coast. Each and every day is a new opportunity for Brias Ha'olam. As we say it in davening, that he renews with his goodness each and every day the Maaseh Bereshis, the creation that took place at the beginning of all time. We know that the world, the universe, was created through chesed. That we've already established. So you need to know that just as in the beginning, everything was created through the midah, through the attribute of kindness. Each and every day, the only reason why the world continues to rotate on its axis is because of the midah of chesed, of the attribute of kindness. And with that we can understand what it means when it says that a day in which a Jew doesn't act with kindness, it's as if that day never happened in his life. Why? Because there was no chiddush of Maaseh Bereshis in that day. It's as if there was nothing going on. It's a vacuum. Because if it's true to say that chesed underpins everything about the world, about the universe, about the existence of everything, then if there's no chesed, it doesn't exist. So on an individual basis, if you exist only as a result of kindness, and if you're not kind, you know what that means? As if you didn't exist. So that day doesn't count towards your lifetime, towards your lifespan. And that's what's so interesting. That it's specifically the midah of chesed that has been isolated. It's unique from all the other mitzvahs and masim tovim that you can do. Anything else that we would care to mention in terms of the good things that one does in one's life don't exist in terms of this particular dynamic. This dynamic requires one thing and one thing only, and that is chesed. If you have to understand that the whole idea of the world existing is completely based on this concept of chesed. Because every day, the fact that the world exists is because of the midah of chesed. We better get into the chesed mode if we want to perpetuate the existence of the universe. It's midas chesed. That's why each and every day you need to wake up in the morning and think to yourself, what am I going to do today that's an act of chesed? Because it's only through chesed that the world exists. And you have to rely on the fact that you're doing chesed. You can't rely on the fact that others are doing chesed, because perhaps they won't. So it's all down to you. Each and every one of us has a responsibility to do an act of chesed each and every day, so that we can be part of this dynamic of Mechadesh b'chol yom b'tuvay Maaseh Bereshis. Ki anu zekukim b'chol yom lechesed min hashamayim, because we require chesed from heaven every day so that we can exist. And the only way that can happen, if we understand that God is our reflection, God is our shadow, is if we do acts of chesed, and then God will act with chesed towards us. So whether it's b'mach or mishta v'chol sharin yonim, if you need food, how come you get food? How come you're able to have food? You only have food because Hashem did chesed with you. You need to eat every day. You can't go by a week without eating. But if you're not doing chesed, why should it be that today you're going to have food? You're going to have food only if you act out the chesed, then God will act out the chesed with you. The same with drink and with all other matters pertaining to your day-to-day life. Shekulam heim The only reason that we are able to get these things and have these things in our lives is because Hashem has chesed on us. And if it wouldn't be for the fact that God has chesed upon us, we'd just be like a rock. That if you leave a rock, and a rock can be in the same place for 1,000 years. Why? Because unless somebody turns the rock over, the rock is going to stay in the same place. That's how we would be. That's how we, even though we're animate, we are alive, and we're self-ambulating. It makes no difference. We can't do it unless Hashem has chesed on us. That's what the principle is that we have established. Which is why that if you don't do chesed on a particular day, it doesn't count as a day, it doesn't exist. Because you lack the medium by which you can connect with Hashem above, and that medium is chesed. That's what you need to know. And we say every day in Shemona Esrei 3 times a day, Moedim anachnu lach. What is the language that is used by Chazal for the thank you that we give to Hashem? We say thank you Hashem every day, 3 times a day, at least 3 times a day. But formally in our prayers we say thank you to Hashem 3 times every day. Moedim anachnu lach. What do we say? Al nisecha shebechol yoim imanu. On your miracles that are with us every single day. Al nifloisecha, on your wonders, v'toivasecha, on your goodnesses. Shebechol eis erev v'avoyke v'tzorim. At all times, in the evening, in the morning, and in the afternoon. V'chol yoim v'yoim Yehudi zokuk lechasti Hashem Yisbarach. That's telling us, when we say thank you for that, and you know that Chazal prepared the thank you so it should be a reflection of our needs. We're thanking Hashem for the things that we got, that we need. Well, what's the language, the formal language of the thank you that Chazal prepared for us, the Anshe Knesset Agdola prepared for us in the Matbeah of Tefillah? The language that's used is indicative of the fact that we need Hashem to do things for us the wonders and the miracles each and every day. Why? We need them because every single day the Jewish person, a person needs to have the kindnesses of Hashem showered upon him, because without that you're not going to have anything. Nisim and Niflois, you're going to have wonders and miracles. Erev Avoikav Tzaharoim, whether it's evening, whether it's morning, whether it's afternoon. And we say thank you to Hashem for every single breath that we can take. You breathed just now, and then you breathed again, and then you breathed again. Each beat of your heart, every single aspect of your being, each one of those things we have to say thank you to Hashem for, because at any moment it can stop, and at any moment it might not be there. So we need to say thank you Hashem, not thank you for something you did last week, thank you for something you did right now, he's doing right now, and continues to do. And that's why we have to daven 3 times a day, Erev Avoikav Tzaharoim, and every single day, B'chol Yoim, Al Nisecha V'al Nifloisecha. And what can we draw out of this particular word? Your miracles, shebechol yoim imanu, that are with us every day. Hainu dvarim she'al pi teva, efsheli notel rak al yidei nes. And that's because if it wouldn't be for the fact that Hashem allows us to have these things, we wouldn't have those things. They are a miracle that they happen and that they occur in the right way and in such a way that they can sustain us. Sha'odam ba'atzma eino yoidea klal elu gzeres nigzru alav. Ilu gzeres nigzru alav. Nobody knows whether there's been some decree, a harsh decree, that you shouldn't survive through the day. You woke up this morning and you probably think to yourself, I'm going to live out the day and I'm going to go to sleep tonight and I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and the same thing's going to happen. Nobody thinks to themselves, today is the day I'm going to die. It's just a fact of life that we imagine that we're going to live, and we're going to live every single day and out, it's going to, unless of course you're sick or something's wrong with you, but in a general sense, the average person believes that each and every day is, I'm alive, and that's what's going to be for the rest of the day and for tomorrow and for this week and for this month. That being the case, we're not aware of the gzeros that have been decreed upon us, therefore you're not aware of how many nisim. Could be that you've got 10 gezeros against you today, so you don't realize how many miracles have occurred, and as a result of those nisim, as a result of those miracles, that you're able to function today. So the ein baal hanes makir benisoi, and the person who's having the nes performed for them doesn't even realize that it's Hashem's nisim that keeps them going. But it's as a result of God's kindness that all of those gzeros are nullified, and that we're able to live out each and every day that we are alive. That's why we're here. Chesed hu yesoid binyan ha'olam, because it is chesed, it is kindness that is the fundament that underpins everything that is the existence of this universe, of this world. And just as we know that that's the case in the generalities, in the universal sense, so too is it in the particular sense with each individual person, because each person is we describe as a olam hakotten, a world on their own. Each person only exists as a result of the chesed that was directly aimed at them. And now we understand this pasuk, that Avraham was old and he was a ba bayamim. Why was he old? It was a matter of chesed, that it was ba bayamim, that each day that he had, it's the first time that we have this concept of zaken in the Torah, and the Torah wants to tell us he's a ba bayamim. Each and every day that he was alive, don't measure it simply he reached the age of whatever it was, 100 and something, and therefore he's so old. 100 and something years is made up of individual days throughout that person's life, and each and every one of those days was a miracle. That's what it was. So here that we're mentioning this idea of zaken, it's with Avraham Avinu. I told you it's the headquarters. You don't have to say it anymore with Yitzchak and with Yaakov, because with Yitzchak and with Yaakov, we've already established the principle that somebody who's a zaken is a ba bayamim. But in this particular case, where we're mentioning it with Avram, it's the first time we're mentioning this concept of zaken, that we are attributing it to this idea of chesed, of olam chesed yibane. That's why he was a ba bayamim. She'en midas hachesed kishar mitzvos. So, and we know that the midah of chesed is not like the other mitzvahs. We know that other mitzvahs are, there's all types of other conditions that will apply to those other mitzvahs and things that happen in your life and things that you do in your life. Ella, he mitzvah tamidis. But now we're talking about Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu is a representation of kindness. He is the paradigm. His whole life, wall to wall, every part of him, every aspect of his personality is centered around kindness. That's something which is constant. It's almost as if it's in the background. That's how much it is a part of who he is, of the fabric of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was the paradigm of kindness. It's not like other mitzvahs which you can do here or you could do there, but you can't do them all the time. Here is something that you can do all the time, and it's something that we need to do all the time. We need to be ambassadors of chesed at all times. Ella hi mitzvah tamidis hamuteles al Yehudi b'chol yom. Each and every day we need to be people who are full of chesed. The yom she'eino eisa b'chesed enech shel yom b'chaim. And if you didn't do chesed, it's not considered a day in your life. We know Avraham filled every single day with chesed. We do know that. That's what made Avraham so special. So when we say it was a zaken ba bayamim, each and every day of those days counted. Why? Because we know that Avraham Avinu did chesed on each and every one of the days of his life. Because if you don't do chesed, you haven't got the possibility of drawing down on the chesed of God that he'll have for you. It's only as a result of God's kindness that we're able to avert disaster each and every day. You walked in the road, you crossed the road. The fact that you didn't cross in front of a car, that's a chesed. You may think not. I looked. It could be that a car will misjudge or the driver will put the foot down on the gas, on the accelerator, and chas v'chalila, a person can get run down. It didn't happen. You should know that's an act of chesed, because it does happen sometimes. People do unfortunately get run over by cars. That being the case, we need to I'm just giving you one very little example, but there's so many examples of things that could go wrong in our everyday lives and that don't go wrong. You have to understand that that's because Hashem had chesed on you. Now we understand this idea that Avraham, in and of himself, is a blessing. That we said that Avram is a person who's a representation of blessing. You come into contact with him, he's a blessing. You see him across the street, he's a blessing. What does that mean? It's specifically about Avram that this was said. Why? Because you have to understand that there's something about chesed that's not just confined to the individual who acts out the chesed. It is infectious. Not infectious in a negative sense, infectious in a positive sense. It radiates beyond the individual himself or herself. It radiates well beyond. If you see somebody who's a Baal Chesed, that has an impact on you. You will be impacted by that person's Chesed. Chesed hu makoir habracha. Chesed is the source of blessing. Lekol habracha is of all the blessings. V'kiven Avram Avinu. The highest form of chesed that can ever exist in a human being, that's what Avram Avinu represents. We need to understand that. We need to really get our heads around that he was the ultimate ambassador, the ultimate purveyor, the ultimate giver of chesed in the world. In history, in human history, Avram Avinu is the true representation of human kindness in this world. Which means that the chesed that he radiated, that the chesed that he gave over as a result of his mere existence, as a result of people coming into very brief contact with him, is immeasurable. Simply coming in close proximity to him was sufficient enough for him to be a blessing to you. You didn't need to speak to him. You didn't need to have to speak to him about anything holy or spiritual. You just could see him. That in and of itself would have a powerful impact on you. He is the bracha. Machlas medabekes kosher rachman litzlan. Same if somebody's got an infectious disease. It's the opposite. I told you, for every yin there's a yang, or for every yang there's a yin. Here in this situation, we have somebody who's got an infectious disease. We want to avoid them, want to stay out of the room, we want to socially distance, we want them isolated. Why? Because even if you're going to see them across the road, there is social distance, there is a danger that there's going to be aerosols that are carried in the breeze, and somehow we are going to be infected with their infectious disease. We don't want that to happen. The opposite is true when it comes to goodness. We want to be in their proximity, even in distant proximity. We want to be able to see them from afar. Somehow that energy, somehow that vibe will affect us in a positive way. Anybody who comes close to a person who's infected will become themselves infected. Maruba, so much more so, all the more so when it comes to toiv, to goodness, to kindness, to compassion, etc. That is that condition, that idea applies. Avram Avinu in his mere existence, even if people just saw him walking down the street, had such a powerful influence on the world around him because he was this exemplar of kindness, this ambassador of chesed in the human world. that it says that I will bless you, Zeu Sho'imim Elokei Avraham. And that's what the Gemara in Pesachim means when it says Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, but we end with Mogen Avram. Ve'yei bracha b'chachos min Mogen Avram. We end with Mogen Avram. Avram is the true protection for humankind. Shehahaschala he midas hachesed v'asoifu midas hachesed. Because everything starts, we begin Elokei Avraham. It begins with chesed and it ends with chesed. Mogen Avraham, the protector of Avraham, but through Avraham we too are protected. We the shield of Abraham is a shield for all those who are affected by Abraham's behavior, by his exemplary chesed that he demonstrates each and every minute of his existence. That's why we end the bracha with Avraham, not with Mogen Avos, which is a more generic idea. Of course, Yitzchak had attributes, and of course Yaakov had attributes, but it's the attribute of chesed that we want to focus on when we close that first bracha of Shemona Esrei. Ki midas hachesed hi mekoyer habracha, because the midah of chesed is the source of blessings b'chol ha'inyonim, in every aspect of our existence. Uv'chachos min Mogen Avram, and that's why we end with Mogen Avram, shezeh yesoid binyan ha'olam, because that is the source, the fundamental source, the underpinning. It's the foundation of the entire world, of the whole universe, of everything that's in existence. I'm going to leave it here. The Nesivos Sholom goes on. It's a beautiful Nesivos Sholom, but just to say that we don't focus enough on this idea of chesed. We imagine that we have to do mitzvahs and we have to daven, and we're so meticulous in many of the mitzvahs that we keep and that we observe and we make sure we're doing them properly. When it comes to chesed, I can do it tomorrow, big deal. I'm a very kind person by nature, but today I just don't have time. I'm busy with something else. I have to run to shul. I have to go to a shir. I have to, I have to pick up my lulav. I have to make sure that I've prepared the wicks for the menorah, for Chanukah, whatever it is. Don't forget, you need to have chesed. You need to do some act of chesed every single day, because olam chesed yiboneh ve'yeh bracha, and then you will be a blessing. You will be the source of blessing for the world, not the chesed that you do. And it's something that, by the way, says the Nesivos Sholom, that you don't have to mean it. It's, every other mitzvah, if you don't do it with the right kavanah, you haven't really done it properly. Like, if you have to understand Shabbos to keep Shabbos. You don't have to understand kindness. You can even be against kindness. You can be completely opposed to it, but the kindness works. You know why? Because the recipient of the kindness doesn't care whether you meant it or you didn't mean it. It's of no interest to that person. The person needed your charity and you gave it, and they're going to benefit from it, then chesed works. Chesed is powerful. Make sure that you are, that we all are. I hope that I am as well. Let's make sure that we are all ambassadors of kindness, of compassion, that we take care of others in every possible situation and given opportunity. We'll leave it here. Thank you so much.